All right, take a look at the note sheet because we don't have. We can go in any particular order that we want. What are any of these that we feel confident about some descriptions of, whether it be the apple wound or jobs that people are having or things along those lines? Taking a look at them, what would be some that off the top of your head, you don't have to worry about a page number, but you can think about some specific details that you have. Okay, so for the very first one, remember how long it's been? Okay, so yep, so, and this starts off right at the top with what we have here on page 53. So effects of the apple wound. Number one, the wound, it's basically, it uses the phrase like it's been consumed by his flesh. So if you're taking a look within your packet, right at the very top of the page, I'll switch the contrast so you can see it a little bit better. The description for his serious wound, which he suffered for over a month, is certainly starting to limit what he can do. So it has remained in his flesh as a visible reminder, and it's something that has really kind of limited his ability for him to move. So opening here on page 53, we have the overall effects of the apple. So first page of part 3, which is going to be for us here, it's at page 53 is where it's going to start, is where we're getting our description for what the apple is going to be. So page 53, apple is still stuck in his flesh, and it has been over a month at this point. So he is certainly weakened, where walking is difficult. Now, this might not be something that's getting addressed directly within the passage. What can we then infer from the fact that he still has a wound, or he still has an apple within him, that it's been a month, and he's still within the same room, he's still going along the same kind of feeding pattern? What can we kind of assume now so far as family in regards to him? And we've kind of been building towards this, but this is kind of giving us the cherry on top for it. And I would say you could probably go 2 words where you could say isolated, and the other one's going to be alienated. And you could kind of argue, like, what's the difference between the two? I think a way of looking at it would be, if you're isolated, you kind of choose to separate yourself. So he is now alienated by his family, and you could even kind of take it a step further, where it seems that he is overall forgotten by his family at this point. Or if he has a serious wound, you know, if you got like a broken arm or a broken leg, and it's known that there's some kind of serious injury, and nothing's being done for you over the course of a month, where you would be dependent upon other folks, that's going to be a serious indicator that maybe that relationship within the family that you would expect is not going to be there. So it's not only that he's being ignored by his father at this point, who's the one who threw the apple, but it also would seem to kind of be Greta's neglecting him, mother is neglecting him, and at this point that he's not looked upon as a family member at all, which would make us kind of go, that transformation has pretty much been complete at this point. A lot of you started within your notes to kind of put a couple more details under this part for family's new job and economic situation. And page 54 is where we kind of start to learn about this stuff. What are things that are going on for both Mother and Greta in regards to jobs for them? Gia? So, yep, Mother is a seamstress. And it's kind of like a fashion boutique type place. So a seamstress for a fashion shop. And Greta is a salesperson. And she's also studying, mentions 2 things. One is a foreign language. She's learning to speak French. And she's also learning stenography. Stenography is shorthand. So, and it's not something that really gets used quite as much, but before like easy computer typing there would be shorthand that secretaries would be using so that if you were writing something that was being dictated, you had like an easier, simpler way to write it down without having to spell out the words quite as much. So she's a salesperson, but she's also studying French, which is going to be looked at as being like a little bit more of an aristocratic language, and she's learning stenography, which is going to be kind of associated with having more of a career for her. So this is both happening here on page 54, where we were looking before. Mother sewed fine undergarments at a fashion shop. Sister takes on the job as the sales girl. So you have employment for the family. And we get a description of father that he is still working, even though he has his uniform at all the time, but he's still going to be working at the bank. So now all three of them have the ability to make money and be able to provide for the family. So why can Gregor be alienated? Why do you not have to worry about him being an active part of the family? Because at this point, it would at least seem financially, doesn't mean that their life is going to be easy, but financially, Gregor is no longer needed. So financially, Gregor is no longer needed. And what else do they do that brings in some money? They sell jewelry. So that's kind of like a one-time thing that they do. And then the other good detail, another thing, they rent out the apartment to they get referred to as like the lodgers or the hoarders. Both of those work. But they're renting the apartment out. Now, we realize towards the end that they decide they're not going to pay money for it, but they have ways that they're able to kind of bring in money, whether it's selling jewelry, whether it's the savings that they already had from before, the money that they were saving from Gregor's paycheck. So you can alienate a person, at least in their viewpoint, who is no longer going to be needed at that point. How's Gregor's room? It is messy, because what's going into his room now? So page 57, 58, they kind of start to go into some detail with it. There is all over the walls are covered with dirt. So walls are covered with dirt. On page 60, it's kind of becoming the extra storage / junk room. If there's anything that the cleaning lady doesn't know where to put it, it's just going to go into Gregor's room. Greta sees the dirt, but she decides that she's going to simply let it stay. And some of you were even kind of marking down that Father basically forbids Mother and Greta from even trying to clean up the room anymore at this part. So he doesn't want anything to be done with it so far as taking care of Gregor. So Father tells Mother and Greta to no longer clean. Not the apartment, but going to be Gregor's room at this point. So dirt's all over the walls, decides to let it stay. It's becoming extra storage for anything that they need, belongings they don't know where to put, or any kind of junk. If we're taking a look with pages 57, 58, where this is happening, 57, 58, over here on 57, that second paragraph, he's filled with sheer anger over the wretched care he was getting, even though he couldn't imagine anything that he'd have an appetite for food-wise. And then over here is where his room is really becoming a mess. This last part here, indeed, she perceived the dirt as much as he did, but decided just to let it stay. Greta no longer cares for Gregor at this point, whether it seemed to be food-wise or even taking care of his room. And then down here, Father decides, reproaches Mother and Greta for ever kind of cleaning Gregor's room. So on page 58 is where it's decided that that's not going to happen anymore at this point. Anyone recall how the maid refers to Gregor? The words that get used? Little dung beetle. So she uses the phrase "little dung beetle" when anytime she sees Gregor, and that term gets used here on page 59. What makes her different from any of the other cleaning ladies that they've had, or servant girls, or whatever? She is definitely older. The other ones would get described as being young, so that's accurate. She's not. There doesn't seem to be any kind of fear whatsoever. Sees him, recognizes him, notices him, but there's not kind of that, oh my goodness, I have to get out of here. She's not demanding to be relieved from her duties. So she is an older woman who shows no fear whatsoever towards Gregor. And really, even that part where Gregor kind of goes to even attack her a little bit or try to be intimidating, she picks up the chair and basically goes, this isn't going to go any further. And he stops at that point. So there is absolutely no show of fear or anything on her part, no desire to quit her job or to leave the flat or apartment. Katie, you got stuff written on the bottom of your page. Which one were you looking at?
I was looking at that.
Okay.
That. Basically, he felt like so much of a burden to his family. He was just embarrassed to. He kind of got soft, when everyone was denying him and all in the parlor, and he basically just I don't know, just felt so discouraged, and he just died by dawn the next day.
So, and this part all gets described here on page 71, 71, 72. So we're here within this first column on 71, which is that first full paragraph, that second paragraph on the page. And mentioned that, by dawn is when he ultimately dies. So we got Gregor's death. One thing that we have highlighted here, he remembered his family with deep feeling and love, which certainly seems to be a pretty stark contrast to the way that the family is viewing him as being a burden and whatnot. So he remembers his family with deep feeling and love. In this business, his own thought that he had to disappear was, if possible, even more decisive than his sister. So there is that desire for him to no longer kind of be a burden. He remained in this state of empty and peaceful reflection until the tower struck 3 o'clock in the morning, and then from the window he witnessed the beginning of the general dawning outside. What's been the description of the weather up until this point throughout the story, part 1, part 2? Because we've already had some details before where when it starts in part 1, it's raining outside, and he mentions it's still foggy. When he tries to look out the window in part 2 at the hospital, he comments on how foggy it still is and how things are getting blurry. And part of that's going to be his eyesight. But you have essentially the total opposite weather from at least the very beginning here with part number 1. What do we tend to think of symbolically of daybreak, dawning? You see the sun kind of starting to come up over the horizon. Waking up, something that we were excited to do today. Sausage, egg, cheese, biscuits.
Bacon.
It's a lot of meat now if you're going with sausage too.
Well, I'm just thinking about.
I would pick the bacon over the sausage. You need your sandwich because it's a new day. You need your energy because it's going to be a new day. You have a chance for whatever was going on the day before. It's different now because you have a new day. So with the dawning, it usually tends to be rather hopeful. For Gregor, it would seem that his death isn't going to be something hopeful. But what does kind of happen for him? You have a relief of the burden, whether it be, you could look at it two ways, the relief of the burden that could be going to the family, or you would have the relief of the burden that it's something that he no longer has to deal with at this point. But Gregor's death, you have taking place at dawn at approximately 3 a.m., which sounds like an early dawn, but this is before like daylight savings time and all that kind of stuff would be going into effect. Over in Europe, you would get a dawn that could be happening that early. It doesn't go into a whole lot of detail about how he dies. It's pretty much just that he has his last breath. What has he not been doing in part 3 that he was doing much more frequently in part 2, especially at the beginning? Food, eating. So essentially, his death is going to be caused by starvation. And it's going to be very ambiguous if this is something that he's choosing to do, or is it something that naturally happens just because he doesn't have the strength to be able to eat anymore. But death is caused by starvation, lack of nourishment, lack of food, plus the fact that his living conditions that he's in are so much more decrepit than they were before. That's certainly not going to be helping for him whatsoever anymore. But certainly you have that general dawning that kind of takes place at this point. One thing to notice is when the family, go that page. When the family comes to take a look at him, because the cleaning woman is the first one who finds him, and she mentions right here, it's kick the bucket. One thing that she does is she tries to kind of poke at him a little bit with the broomstick. So she's not even getting down on all fours and checking for pulse or anything like that. But when you get over here to page 73, and they start to take a look at him, they start to notice how much he has changed so far as how little he is, how flat he is at that point, how weak he has kind of become. And they also do something which seems pretty subtle, but so far as the pronoun usage within this paragraph, Greta, who did not take her eyes off the corpse, said, "Look how thin he was. He had eaten nothing for such a long time." Mr. Kane? Hey. All right. I do. Sure. Yeah, no problem. Yep. Jenna, nurse's office, just stopped down at the end of class. So after the bell rings. That should be pretty quick. Calls him he. Makes sense. Because his name is Gregor. Male. How does Greta refer to him before his death? There's a lot of things, and especially early, right before the death, "It must be gotten rid of," cried the sister. "That is the only way, Father. You have to get rid of the idea that this is Gregor. The fact that we believed it so long, that's truly our real misfortune. But how can it be Gregor?" And then it keeps on going with it. So you have this use of pronouns, and this one here is on page 69. So this is 2 pages before the death, where Greta has constant reference to Gregor as it, which seems subtle because you're just talking about one two-letter pronoun he switching over to it, but this is going to be dehumanizing in the sense that it's being referred to more as what we would think of like an animal or an object is going to have that use of it, but it takes away that person aspect to it. But by the time 73 rolls around, now the it has transformed or has changed back to he. It might be something that Greta doesn't even realize she's doing. It could be a little bit of sympathy kind of starting to take place, but you do have a change, at least in the way that they kind of view the way that Gregor's life is. So at least he, post-death, Greta calls Gregor he, as opposed to what it was being it before. Irony that takes place. What do they do after his death? We got a person who works at a bank. We got a person who's a sales girl. We got a person who works as a seamstress at a fashion shop. They talk about thinking about moving. They don't quite, get that far yet, but it's something where they kind of take a look at downsizing. But even right before you kind of get to this part here with the family thoughts on the trolley, all all members of the family. So this is going to be father, mother, and Greta take a day off from work. Why are we going to write ironic down at the bottom of the page for this? And the one time that he does take the day off from work, they get upset with him. The boss is showing up as to why are you not at work. So it's like we're kind of coming back full circle here. Gregor is getting in trouble for taking a day off from work. Now that Gregor has passed and he is considered no longer a quote-unquote burden to the family, they basically end up celebrating by being able to take a day off from work. So you certainly end up with a perfect example of the double standard of Gregor versus everyone else. And that could be within the family, or that could be just people within society in general. What's the closing thought that Dad's starting to have at the end of the story? Son is no longer in the picture. I have a young daughter, 17, beautiful. Now I can look for a husband for her. Financially, it would be good for him because he would get dowry. Remember we talked about how Gregor kind of turned into the parasite, metaphorically as becoming a bug. But father is the one who's kind of living off of the family. So there's another change that's going to be happening, or another metamorphosis within the family. Now that Greta might be someone who's going to be married off. When you come in tomorrow, you're going to see what's going to look like a blank sheet. It's not a quiz. But we're going to be taking a look at symbols that are in parts 1, part 2, and part 3. Because the essay assignment that we're going to be working on starting next week is all about locating symbols in those 3 parts. So we're going to start off with some symbols, go back into the book, go back to the pages, find some examples, find some meaning. Going over here.